Starting in 3, 2, 1. I think it's working. Hey, what's up, everybody? How the heck are you? Welcome, Truth Seekers. This is OhHaleYeah here. That's the Simple Symon over there. How are you, Simple Symon?
Feeling good.
I got to mute myself on the stream. All right, sorry. I got to test to make sure it works on my end, and my shirt is blinking color. So welcome, everyone. This is our second live stream, and it couldn't have been any more right spot on time because the State of the Union was this week. And if it had been the last 8 years, Simon, I don't really know if I would have had that much to talk about, except for, I guess we're doing okay. The state is a union. The union's a state, and Obama has a lot of things on his list that we're still struggling with. We're still kind of racist. We're still kind of bigoted. We still got a long ways to go to be like the rest of Eastern Europe. And I didn't get too much of that last night. So I'm thinking we could talk about the Democrats' zero-sum game, how Trump cannot be out-Trumped because he's Trump. And we can't finish without talking about how hot you are and conservatives in general. It's science. Cambridge made it official. Conservatives are hot. So how do you feel about that?
I feel good. I can't wait to talk about how hot I am.
We should probably start with that and get that out of the way. How hot are you?
You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, probably a good solid 5.5. But we're both married to conservative women. So if we say that conservative women are the hottest, of course we're going to say yes.
So the halo effect, no doubt. What is it? This is going to be an awkward conversation because it's science now. Like, we know that conservatives are hotter. Like, that's set, the science is settled. What is it specifically outside of the expert opinion that basically that we knew this all along? Like, we didn't have to have science tell us, but now that they did, elaborate for us.
Well, you know, women are, you know, everybody has their own style and their own preferences, right? Blondes, brunettes, all that kind of stuff. But really, when it comes down to is, you know, mystery still plays a big part in, you know, the wonder and you know, the whole part of that first part of your relationship where everything's new and everything's still an adventure. I think you get a lot of that with conservative people because they dress more conservative. They, you know, maybe aren't as revealing. They don't flaunt that stuff. Not only I'm talking about their bodies or their face or anything like that. I'm talking about just in general, right? They're not flaunting you know, their personal lives and all that kind of stuff. So that shroud of mystery sometimes adds, you know, can click a woman or I guess, is it conservative men too? I don't think it's conservative.
Yeah,
men,
it is. Well, obviously.
Well, yeah, we're not all hell yeahs, you know what I'm saying? But that conservative part of, I would say, is part of the mystery. The mystery of somebody that dresses conservative, acts conservative, maybe doesn't flaunt everything they have on Instagram or Facebook.
So obviously we know it because we're married and we've been in the conservative dating pool for a long time. But there were 2 articles that came out. One was the one published in the Cambridge University study, and the other one was actually in the Atlantic a few months ago, talking about how politicians that are right-leaning are also easier on the eyes. So I'll give you the first clip that caught my mind from the Cambridge article. It said, if physical appearance affects how we interact with each other, and our political beliefs emerge as a byproduct of our early life experiences, it stands to reason that appearance would also influence the development of individual political beliefs. I thought this was odd because this was a liberal commentator kind of spinning this to give the reason why this is, right? Like, people who don't have a certain upbringing are at a deficit, which fits into the class argument that it makes sense because of opportunity and privilege that these people would kind of roll together and that this ideology would appeal to them. I call total BS on that. What say you?
Yeah, yeah, I don't 100% agree. So if you look at it from a couple of different angles, right? So when we say something is mainstream, right? So Kate Upton, right, is she's been on countless Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition models as the #1 model. And, you know, it used to be, you know, the skinny minis and all that kind of stuff, but Kate Upton is an actual woman, right? She's
a 5.5 too, like you. You're rating out of 5, right?
Yeah. If I had a nickel for every time she tried to hit on me, I'd owe you 37 cents. But the thing about Kate Upton is she's a beautiful woman, a natural beauty, right? But the whole thing is, when you're thinking about the beauty part and the mainstream part, when you get to the outliers, right? That's a specific type of person somebody's looking for. And I don't know if there's too many conservative that you can say are in either side of the outliers, like, more like the Amish, right, is one outlier. I don't know how many people think, gosh, man, that chick on the Bug and Carry was amazing, and then you have maybe that punk rocker Miley Cyrus,
the foam finger look. Yeah.
Foam finger look. Yeah, sure. I think so. Once you get to those outliers on either side, I think when you talk about mainstream, I think you probably have some more conservatives that are more mainstream than anybody else. And so therefore, more natural that more people are interested in.
So part 2 was in the Atlantic, and it says ardent liberal and extreme feminist. I'd like to know what constitutes an extreme feminist. Lindy West agreed with the findings, but explained that conservative women read pretty because they have it easier in life. Quote, so is it any surprise that Republican women tend to read pretty, ? Unquote. It's a much tougher path for the women who don't. So basically what she's saying is when you look at liberal and left-leaning female or male politicians, you can tell that life has been harder on them because they wear it on their face.
I thought it was because so that doesn't mean illiterate beauties. Like if
they don't read good.
Yeah, they don't read good.
They just want to learn to do other stuff good too. I don't know what it means to read pretty, but we know it's because they haven't had a tougher path in life to follow, unlike their leftist counterparts.
There might be something to that a little bit. I'm not going to say that that's total BS, because I think you have people that do live hard lives, right? And they don't, their parents are working 2-3 jobs to support them, and not necessarily teaching them how to put on makeup, right? So the kids that grow up maybe in more of that middle class family, but that doesn't excuse the fact that you can't teach your kid to present themselves better. You can't tell them that, tuck in your shirt, wear a belt when you tuck something in, speak, nicely, take a shower every night. That's just like the bane of my kid's existence. But, like there is parts to it where you can teach somebody to do something. It might not always be the best, but there might be a little to that one. I'm not going to say that it doesn't.
So it's interesting. I'm going to feign outrage that you're agreeing with that, but it is true. I was reading an article, a contrary evidence article recently about certain types of privilege. And one of them was that if you are born into a wealthy family or you have a quote unquote right or American privilege, you don't have to make up the deficits, right? You don't have to go out there and scrap and scramble and deal with the stress from not being able to pay bills and make rent and not know where your next meal is coming from. And that takes a toll on you. And a lot of people can't ever dig their way out or overcome that deficit. However, the one thing I would say is if you are a type of person, like I posted a Jordan Peterson article this morning, and the one thing he always talks about is chaos versus order and cleaning up your room before you try to save the world and constantly aggregating your improvement and your skills and the things that you can do better, you focus on those. And I think if I have to associate with something, it's that people who do those things are attractive in more ways than one. It's not just physical, it's spiritual, it's moral. It's this vibe they put off that they're a person of accomplishment, a person of ambition, a person who has drive and focus. And my question is, does that inform and improve every aspect of their life? Do they put off more positive energy? Do they draw more people into their circle? Do they have this, religiously we'd call it a light about them that they're sharing with others that makes other people happier and more pleased to be around them? And is there what's the Weinstein word I would use, an effect, a multiplier effect to that helps everyone around them and makes them perceive them as someone who, in this case, would say had an easier path because of what they give out to the universe, they get more back. I mean, that's a universal principle. How much does that play into the perceived attractiveness, since that's what we're talking about? People voted on how attractive they thought people were. How much does that play into what we perceive because of what the person puts out first?
Yeah, you could say that, because, I mean, if you have people that are eloquent speakers, right? I think Barack Obama had a great effect on this, right? I mean, obviously, he wasn't a horrible looking man, but the fact that he could orate and, he could get down to that deeper level, deeper meaning and show the emotion and stuff, it made him a better looking man. That's of course he grew up upper middle class, but, I guess it doesn't take away from the thing we're both having that discussion about. But, you have other people too that, and we see this all the time, right? We have friends that are probably not the best looking friends or anything like that, but because of their ability to, obviously, like you said, be nice, they're good people, they do charity work, but they're funny, right? They're charismatic. They're always good with a joke. They're always good to brighten up your day when you're having a bad day. Those people elevate, because of the beauty they have inside. I definitely agree with you on that. If somebody's got a little bit of a light shining, that's better than somebody that's dim in the party. So
yeah, I would add, if I always like to throw in the religious part of it. There's a scripture in the New Testament that talks about how someday when we see Christ, we will be like him, and it says we shall see him as he is, and we will be like him. And so the principle I adhere to is that your thoughts influence your behavior, influence your actions, influence the outcome, and that actually has a physical effect on you. You change as a person, and there eventually, when it's done long enough, you become something different than you were before. And the scripture says you will see him as he is because you will be like him. I think, what does that actually mean? When they wrote it, it had a meaning. And I think to understand what it means, it has to be self-evident because of something you've done, not just because you've read it on paper. It has to be, you have to look back at it in the rearview mirror and say, okay, now this makes sense. But that's what I think about more than just the surface level attractiveness, even though I like to joke about that, especially when I'm online trolling people and showing them pictures of Helen Thomas and what's the Connecticut senator's name? You know, I mean, the ones Paul Joseph Watson called swamp donkeys. I can't remember their names. That's a very Bill Maher thing to say, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think also the two part is people that are confident also. So if you're coming home every day and your first thing is to avoid your kids or avoid your wife and you play video games all day long.
Yep.
Every day. Yeah, every day, that you're going to come in Halo instead of, doing the right thing as a father or as a wife, and, putting your family and your friends and in your church before all the other things that you do every day. And then you spend the night, instead of maybe binge watching Sherlock Holmes or something, you're sitting there, reading a book or reading some articles, or, as I like to do, I try to always start my reading habits, because I don't sleep and my wife goes to sleep, is I start with everything on the left, right? So I want to know what the left's position is going to be so that I can understand what facts that they're basing their stuff off, what they're starting that. And so when I have a conversation with somebody, I don't feel like I'm not confident in what I'm talking about, because I already know what their position is if it's anti my position, and I know how to tame down somebody that is on our position, but maybe a lot more radical. And so that confidence has probably, since the 20 years my wife and I have been together, has probably helped me a lot more. And of course, I would have never gotten those looks if I just came home and played video games every day.
And that's a problem. I actually had a link here that I saved of this. Did you hear about this kid in China that thought he paralyzed himself because he played video games for 20 hours straight in an internet cafe? Did you hear about this?
No, but some kids in China have actually died from binging video games, where they didn't sleep for 4 or 5 days. They were surviving off energy drinks and their hearts gave out. So
that was Korea, right? Those guys are committed. I mean, they're dedicated in China, but they're committed in Korea.
Committed for at least 4 days.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was thinking about how, well, now I forgot what we were talking about, but the opposite side of that, you remember the story with the girl who got punched at the Berkeley protest, and the guy actually socked her and knocked her out, and they called her moldy locks because she was a little bit nasty. She had the locks going on, probably hadn't showered in a few days, like your kids, since you said that earlier. And then they did some memes on her on the internet. They showed pictures of her a couple of years ago where she was this gorgeous, cute, petite blonde. And today she is legit moldy locks. I mean, there's stuff growing in her hair and she's just a total mess. And there's the opposite side of that, where certain ideologies lead to certain behaviors, lead to certain appearances. And there's a lot of proof on that side too, that those thoughts and deeds turn you into an ugly swamp donkey. I want to say that again. That's all I wanted to do. Thanks, Paul Joseph Watson. All right, let's talk about the State of the Union. Since we already talked about it for like 2 days straight, where do you want to start? You want to start with highlights, takeaways, the fact that it was very different from anything we've seen in the last 8 years?
Yeah, I like words that matter, right? So when I think of state and State of the Union, a lot of people will go right to the 50 states and all that kind of stuff, or Secretary of State or anything like that. I think of state, from a science perspective. So when I think of state, I think, you have gas, you have liquid, and you have a solid.
Oh, you're going chemistry. Okay.
Yeah. We're going to go a little chemistry. So make sure you
calculator so I can follow along.
Yeah. Just take down your Bunsen burner a little bit. I don't want your flag to catch fire.
Nerd alert. Okay, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Yes. So 3 parts flask to no. But so anyway, when I think of the 3 types, I mean, there's actually like 6 or 7 types of states of matter now, but the 3 main ones, right?
Like gender. Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah, it's just as fluid and liquid. So when we think about this, we have what do we want our state of our union to be? Do we want it to be solid? Do we want it to be a liquid where it's fluid, it's whatever changing? Or do we want it to be a gas, right? So that at the winds blow, it can go away and become socialism, whatever it's got. I like to think of things as solid, right? I want our state of the union to be the solid state. And I'm sure you have a biblical reference for thinking about things that are solid and how important that is in building foundations. But
I do, but it's in the Apocrypha. It's Screeching Hill, chapter 2, verse 1. What difference at this point does it make, Simon? Why do we care if it's solid?
Because the solidness of our union is based on our Constitution. And I've heard so many years over the last 8 years that our Constitution is a living and breathing document. And it's not. It is not. And that's why we have justices, right? Is to interpret if and when something is not 100% black and white inside the Constitution, and then they can decipher what the true meaning should be based on our founders, based on other law and doctrine and everything else, and then they come to a conclusion that says A, B, or C, right? So when I think of the State of the Union, I think solid, right? Because I don't want it to be fluid. I don't want to not know what, Second Amendment, it kind of means this, or First Amendment, well, not if you would, hurt somebody's feelings, or, and I don't want it to blow away into socialism, right? I don't want to be and lose my freedoms that I have as an American, because these freedoms are the greatest thing that God has ever given us, right? These are the things that if I want to go out and chop down a tree on my property, I can go out and chop down a tree on my property. I mean, I wouldn't because I like trees, but if I wanted to. So when Trump gets up and he started to talk about the State of the Union, I'm thinking over the last 8 years before this, I heard a lot of fluidity, right? I heard a lot of, well, if the air takes us this way, this is where the country wants us to go. So let's go there. I didn't like that. I don't like that, because that means now we're saying that our rock, our foundation, is a living, breathing document of the Constitution, and it's not. And so what I heard a lot in the stories that he gave, and we'll get into some of those, is that we are on a solid foundation, taking away regulations, right? And everybody hears take away a regulation means somebody is chopping down a rainforest. I took away a regulation here that somebody in the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is now going to, have more lawsuits on their hands that they're going to have to deal with to see which bank is screwing who. I mean, like, you have, every time somebody here takes away a regulation, I could tell you some regulations. I mean, you could look them up on the internet, just type in worst regulations in America, and you will see some of the dumbest, most stupid things that our legislators, our people that we put into power by vote, said, we need to do this. And why? Because special interest wants us to. That's why we had a 170,000 page tax document, right?
Do you really think of rainforests when they talk about regulation? Like, is that what everyone has their own light bulb that goes off? Is that what yours is?
No, it's not mine. I know it's not mine, but when I think that I can't collect rainwater in California, that's the regulations I'm thinking of, right? Like, hey, you can't dig a pond on your property because that might take away the watering of where the natural river systems underwater go. And so if you want to build a well, we own that water on your land. Like, who is this? Who are these people? Those are the types of regulations that need to go away.
Yeah, and there might be a petrified delta smelt under the first layer of topsoil. We can't have that. It's funny because when I see it, as I've gotten older and I become repulsed by clutter, that's what I think of. I think of stacks of stuff in your house or your garage or your closet. And you don't just own them, right? They own you. You have to organize them, and then you have to get things out of them, and you have to label them and inventory them. And then sometimes you have to move them, or you could just get rid of them. Like, there is a cost associated with every piece of paper, to think of it, to argue it, to print it, to sign it, to reevaluate it, to study it, to go back to the archives and say, well, do we interpret it properly? Do we know what it means? How do we enforce it? I love when Trump did the visual of the gigantic reams of paper, because in my mind, I'm thinking that's like me cleaning out the garage, or Jordan Peterson cleaning out the room and just getting rid of all of it and saying, I am free. I can breathe again. I can move on to the next thing that's actually important and not deal with any of that. Since some of it, I mean, the regulations don't go away. Some of that stuff is what? Probably over 100 years old. We don't need it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I spit on a sidewalk in Philadelphia, I don't want to get arrested because of some 1892. But
Or in
I just say
Singapore
that
today. Yeah.
because I feel like probably in Philadelphia, a lot of people are spitting on the streets right now.
Let's hope
if they have to grease light poles and everything like that so they don't destroy the city, it just makes me laugh at some of the regulations they probably had to put in place. But yeah, overall, when I think of regulations, I think of what it is that somebody else put into place to make it harder for somebody else in the free market to get into their business. And we talk about FCC regulations and net neutrality, and I know that's not on the list because that's probably a whole 6-episode talk. But
yeah, I'm actually dead right now from net neutrality. You see me here, but I'm dead because it killed me. Supposed to kill everyone, but apparently you're still alive.
It killed 96% of America. I don't even know who we're broadcasting to right now.
Yeah, nobody. Tax cuts killed me first, though. I'm dead twice.
But there's people in Poland that talk about how they have a $13 100 megabyte per second internet speed because there's no FCC regulations, and so there are tons of private companies that have to go through the free market and compete for your business. And I think about those types of things versus, you got your big 3 or 4 different ones in America, because there's so many burdens to be able to even get into a business like that. And so when we talk about, net neutrality and they're going to start charging us, well, if we take away all the regulations, they can charge us all they want. But that means a Google can come in and say, hey, for $15 a month, we're going to broadband the whole city. And, you can be a part of it, and we'll give you 200 megabytes per second. And then the Amazon, who hasn't gotten into that game yet, but they're getting into healthcare, so they'll probably be in the Connect. That's the part of it, is that when he talks about for every one regulation that they put on, he took out 14 or whatever. I get excited about that because that's freeing up the smaller companies to get into a game that bigger companies have dominated for so long, and that drives the costs down. And I know that it's funny when you hear, the left talk about, well, we want big companies, and they're screwing the small guy. They're screwing the small guy because we have a big government that they pay lobbyists to put little bills in all the time to screw the little guy. I mean, you can't want big government and then also cheaper stuff. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, the Amazon point's interesting because I feel like Amazon has already done so many things that people said couldn't be done. When they started shipping overnight, whenever UPS and FedEx shipped overnight, the US Postal Service says, no, it can't be done. Now Amazon's delivering same day, and they're doing drone deliveries. These things have never been done. Their company is larger than Walmart's, and they did it in 10 years. It took Walmart 40 years to do it. And if they get into healthcare, we're going to have another one of these conundrums or quagmires where people say, no, you can't. I actually am curious when the government starts to clamp down and say, no, it's not that you can't do that. It's that we really would prefer that you not, and we're going to make sure that you don't. Because just the interstate commerce factor alone, the fact that I can't buy insurance from the state of Georgia unless I'm part of a partner or business plan is ridiculous. Amazon can make that happen for me, and I can't wait. And like you said earlier, it's akin to the tax breaks where, what was FedEx's number? I think I have it written down here. Was it
3.2 billion, I believe.
3 billion with a B. I was telling my wife the other day, I'm like, if Barack Obama gave a State of the Union address and talked about how he convinced or persuaded Apple to bring back $250 billion just through sheer force of will and personality, he would have 2 Nobel Peace Prizes. But he didn't do it. He didn't even joke about doing it. He said those jobs are never coming back. And I believed him, because it doesn't make sense to build things here when you can do it in China when everybody wants one. It's too expensive. However, Trump did it, and people are sitting on their hands. He got Apple to bring back $250 billion, a leftist company that's adored by liberals. Why did they do it? It's not because they like Trump. It's because Trump can execute. Trump can show the vision. Trump can say, here's what the financial ROI is for you, something that a Barack Obama either wasn't willing or wasn't able to do. And to me, that was the lesson of the entire State of the Union, is all these things that Barack Obama could have easily done. That's the story of American exceptionalism. Anybody can do it, but America did it. And Trump did it at the State of the Union. And the people in that room, half of them anyways, have no interest in those problems being solved. It was very telling for me. Kind of sad, actually.
Well, extremely sad. I mean, God, we can give it 50 examples, but The first one I thought of is that like we should have all applauded, right? It was Preston Sharp. You know, they talked about this 12-year-old kid, I believe from Redding, California,
Yep.
who a 12-year-old. Now, you and I, when we were 12, we were kicked out of our house until dinner time, right? We were playing sports. We were, you know, learning how to tumble. We're doing a lot of other things that you can, you know, as 12-year-olds should do.
I was stealing flags from the cemetery and hiding them. That's what...
I don't doubt that. But a 12-year-old kid figured out a way to bring a whole group of people together and put flags and flowers on 40,000, you know, different graves throughout the veteran cemeteries. And as a person that has a grandparent that I visit, you know, once or twice a year in a veteran, you know, I'm so grateful when I show up there and I see that somebody's already come by and cleaned the grave off, right? People, you know, it's a customary thing that I see is, you know, when we go and we clean her grave and then you put the, you know, the pennies on there for, you know, representing family, is that, you know, you usually clean a few of the adjoining, you know, gravestones next to it, just because out of sheer respect for, you know, you want their area to look nice.
Right.
And there's no way in hell I'm doing that as a 12-year-old, right? I take my kids with me to visit my grandma because I want them to show the respect, and we have a moment of silence. We do all the things we're supposed to do. But I can't get my kids to say, hey, you know, it'd be really cool on my off day or, you know, after my homework is, you know, I want to gather a bunch of people together. We should be applauding this kid who is going out there and honoring these people that fought and in a lot of cases died for us. We haven't sacrificed our lives. We're here talking on, you know, the internet. And yet that should be something everybody could have applauded. I get they didn't want to applaud the national anthem and say we need to stand for it because that takes away their intersectionality of their politics. I get when they didn't want to stand for, you know, other things. But this kid, we can't say thank you to a kid that's made up his own civic duty and not only executed upon that, but is garnering this for 40,000 of our veterans. I think that's pathetic and sad.
When the philosophy is that ideologically this person is evil, the Cheeto monster has to be destroyed. This is why in the title I said you can't out-Trump the Trump. There's an article I want to cite here in a bit, but his ability to paint them into a corner. We've talked before about I was a Ted Cruz guy. You were for Bernie, so obviously we don't agree on a lot of stuff. But his ability to look at
the Ted Cruz autograph bumper sticker, my friend, for my contributions to his campaign.
Is it when you?
It was a $10 minimum, but whatever.
You tried to run him over with your car, and he said it's okay and gave you a bumper sticker. Steve Scalise. So the idea, though, that he picked all these different issues in the speech, and I have written down here some notes that I just thought were fantastic. One, better speech than Obama ever gave. Even Democrats agree. The speech was amazing. There's a lot of people who don't follow politics. They don't care about politics. They only dialed into the State of the Union because the Super Bowl's next week and everybody else was watching it. If that's all they saw, they had to have liked what they heard, because all they've heard about Trump in the news is what a horrible person, what an ingrate human being, and how the world's going to end. They hear about all these accomplishments and they have to make a decision, right? It's a cognitive dissonance of if the things that I've heard formerly true, or are they untrue? Do I believe what I'm hearing now? Do I hear these things for the first time and internalize them and say, wow, maybe things are going better than I've been hearing, or not? And he picks every single little issue or criticism and he destroys it. And then he attaches an optic to it. Speech is better than Obama. Optics better than Obama. The non-Malay is better than Obama. And I just thought these people must be sitting there thinking, how the hell did this happen? How it's like Shawshank Redemption, right? He's like, the last thing that went through their mind, because aside from that bullet, is how did Donald Trump get the best of them? How are they in a position where he's gloating about black unemployment being the lowest it's ever been, and they're not allowed to clap because they've already pushed the narrative too far that this man is a menace and a disease and a danger to the United States that must be stopped at all costs. Now, one of two things is true. Either he is those things or they are those things. And that's it. And there's nothing in between, which is why they can't clap, because you have to admit either one, you were wrong about him, which means two, you lied to your people, or means you lied to him, or number two, you got to stay committed to the narrative, and they have to be strong together like fascists, like a big group of sticks that have strength in numbers. And that's the choice they made. And I hope they keep doing it. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating, and it makes them look like they are the problem. And I don't think anyone, I honestly don't think Rubio could have done what Trump did. I don't think Cruz could have done it. I still have a lot of issues with Trump. He's not my favorite person, but I think in terms of timing and his execution and what he's been able to accomplish, I just sit there and go, you know what? Trump on. Give these people what they've been asking for 40 years and let everyone be the better for it in America.
I read an article this week about how Trump is teaching conservatives that it's okay to fight back, that he's teaching them first how to fight, right? And then he's teaching them how to fight back, because what's the thing that holds us all up as people with the principles and of the right is that we don't want to be the ones that get labeled a racist. We don't want to be the ones that get labeled a homophobe or xenophobia, whatever. You go on, anti-Semite. We don't want that. So what do? We back down because we have jobs, we have families. We don't want to get people in trouble. We don't want to get ourselves in trouble. We want to provide. And Trump's coming in with like a Miley Cyrus wrecking ball and saying, yeah, you don't have to care about that. Like, no matter what you do, they're going to blame you anyway. So just do it. And when he said he was going to be the most conservative president since Ronald Reagan, you and I both know, and I was a never Trumper up until about 2 days before the election. And it was going to be her or him. And I knew she was the most corrupt individual of all time.
I don't think I knew you were a never Trumper. Were you a never Trumper?
Oh, I was only a one never. Yeah.
Because I was never a never Trumper. I'm a constitutionalist. I'm concerned. I was a reluctant, concerned, skeptical Trumper.
The thing was, I wanted him to be better when he finally got the nomination, and he kind of got worse. There was a lot of things that I doubted about him, but when he had Peter Thielen. Peter Thiel, I'm sorry. Yeah, Peter Thiel give a speech at the RNC. It actually told me, when he went to some of these rallies and he was talking about, gay rights and being the first person that doesn't care if people are gay when they're married, as a part libertarian and actually a big part libertarian, I don't think marriage should be involved in the government, right? So if people want to, marry each other, that shouldn't be the government. That should be your church that dictates that, right? The only reason the government is involved because there's taxes involved, right? So as soon as
the church won't do it, well, some do now, but it had to be the government.
Yes, but that's why they called it civil unions, right? Because the churches wouldn't do it, but now there are churches that do it. Now it could be a marriage, or you can go and get married at courthouse or whatever. But I was like, is he really gonna? He's holding gay pride flags up, and I'm thinking, is he really gonna go through it, or is he gonna cave in? And when Peter Thiel gave that speech, I was actually really impressed. Well, here he could have totally pulled back and said, because he was going for this whole segment of the party that is fundamental Christians, right, which is a big part of our party, and then you're going to let, you're going to still hold on to, we should be accepting of anybody that wants to live fiscal responsibility, right? And he did it. And I thought, well, that was actually pretty cool, because to me, I want more people in our party. I want people to know that you don't have to be just, Guy Benson is a great example of that, right? A gay Christian man that is a fiscal conservative. So when he goes to the State of the Union and he starts talking about things, right, he used intersectional politics against them. And when you gave and orated a perfect thing that talked about all of this, them sitting on their hands and they're not allowed to do this. But when you talk about Black unemployment being at an historic all-time low, and then you have the Black Caucus that doesn't not only applaud, doesn't stand, but that tells me one thing, and that is, it's politics over principle. You are an accomplished person if you make it into the House, make it into the Senate of our federal government. That is an accomplishment that is hard to do. Why were you there? What did you run for? Did you run for your constituents? Did you run for the people in your community? Did you run to be a role model? Or did you run to be a face of the Democratic Party? And they all proved that they ran to be the face of the Democratic Party, because to me, I want to celebrate all unemployment, right? Across all barriers and everything else. But unfortunately, I think you're going to see a lot of campaign ads in the midterms now, where they're going to say black unemployment at its all-time low, and they're going to zoom in on the one guy that just sits there and see no evil, hear no evil. Yeah. And that's all you have to do for the ad, is say, who really cares? And Trump, I mean, I thought he was kind of, I think he's kind of nutty sometimes, and he might not have core principles that he's always standing on, but he knows how to market. And when he said 1.8 million dreamers to be given, citizenship and within 12 years, and and he says it's 3 times the amount Barack wanted to do, I laughed, because how could you not applaud that, right?
Yeah, and even that, I'm like, he kind of stuck his finger in my eye a little bit, because I'm not a huge fan of that. But then he followed up with the 3 things that need to happen. I mean, I wasn't born yesterday. I realized the government will never close the border before they'll give amnesty. But he reached out with the olive branch and put them in a position where they had to make a decision about whether or not to support him. And he did that with a list of things. I mean, you have low black unemployment. You have the bonuses for employees. You have the 2.4 million jobs created. You have the American flag, which Sally Cohn came out the next day and was hissing about. I thought, this looks so, like, how stupid are you? You have the In God We Trust, the national anthem, the secured border, the merit-based immigration, fighting opiate abuse. You have Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. I mean, all these things that a lot of them voted for in Congress, and they have to sit there on their hands. And I want to talk about an article that I found recently. I used to talk about Saul Alinsky a lot during the Obama years, because I was so fascinated how many people, not because I have this gay obsession over him, but I'm fascinated how many people that support Obama and thought that people didn't support him because he was racist. I would say, well, and I throw out some of the names that I got from Dinesh D'Souza when you and I met him and I interviewed him, of some of the original, like Giovanni Gentile and some of the original fascists that motivated Mussolini and Hitler to do what they did. Saul Alinsky was also a student of these people. And as I read through some of the things that he said in his books, the more profound things, I want to share some with you. One of the things was, radicals must first rub raw the resentments of the people by selecting a particular political adversary and publicly attacking him as a dangerous enemy. This foe, Alinsky explained, must be clearly identifiable. He can't be a personification. It can't be something general and abstract. And today it's obvious that's Donald Trump. He's got to be destroyed. So that's number 1. Number 2, the organizer who forgets the significance of personal identification will attempt to answer all objections on the basis of logic and merit. With few exceptions, this is a futile procedure. Telling his acolytes you don't want to use reasoned arguments, you just attack, paint the person as evil. And the last one, before men can act, an issue must be polarized. Men will act when they are convinced their cause is 100% on the side of the angels, and that the opposition are 100% on the side of the devil. This is community organizing 101. And if you ascribe to this way of thinking, you have to always attack. You cannot give your opponent any ground. You can't concede any point, any reasonable argument, and you can't clap when a little 12-year-old kid is congratulated for putting out 40,000 flags for veterans. It's a pretty undesirable place to be when the country's doing well, when people are happy, and when 50% of your constituents say they like the State of the Union. I think it says a lot. I mean, if I'm a Black Caucus member and I pretend that I want black unemployment up and I don't cheer for it, I look more like a black slave owner. I look more like Tavis Smiley before he was retired in shame, said at the end of the Obama election that not one social, economic, demographical factor has improved under Barack Obama for black people. And I use that all the time, because I said, if that's the case, what's he doing there? What did you vote for him for? Like you said, what's your stated purpose? And so for these people to act the way they did, I think they made it very obvious. They're following a playbook, which they've been doing since they started, and which is why I think there was so much stock in the Russia investigation. Think about how much of a risk they've taken with the FISA and memo that's going to come out tomorrow, that they actually projected something they are doing to help win elections in order to take him down. And that's the last thing I want to talk about, is not being able to out-Trump the Trump. I think they took a huge and maybe fatal risk, because it looks like someone might actually go to jail for the first time in the history of American politics, well, on the big stage, for making such an obvious, glaring error to try to catch Trump in a trap. And the way I look at it is, at the end of 8 Mile, I haven't used this reference in a while. Eminem had this genius idea that he got from his fat buddy to basically just lay it out on the table and tell they already know everything they're going to say about him. So beat him to the punch. And you look at Trump, we know he's an adulterer. We know he's been a swindler. We know he's been all kinds of bad things. So those don't stick. And when people bring that up, I go, yeah, he was a New York liberal Democrat his entire life. Of course he's all those things. He just switched like 2 years ago. So where's your argument? They can't make anything stick. So they go to the Russia, the thing that they're actually guilty of. And they say, you know what? We can pin this on Trump. And as long as all these boxes are checked, we'll get away with it. It'll work. And we can prove that because he did A, B, and C, we can prove D. So what if we've done A through F or A through Z? It's going to be on Trump because we brought it up and we can make the case. And I think it might actually finally bite them in the backside. What say you?
I have a lot of problems with, we talked a little bit about the FBI last week, and I said that's supposed to be the most pure of all police departments, right? Because it's our federal police department. There should be no politics involved. And, you're hearing, and again, this is stuff we can speculate, but what I'm guessing we're going to hear in the memo is a lot of the things that we want to hear, right? That the dossier is the reason that the FISA warrant was issued. And so when you basically got an unlawful warrant to spy on the Trump campaign based on a bunch of lies, not the book that everybody's quoting right now, but what is it?
Fast and Furious? No. Fire and Fury.
Fire and Fury, yeah.
Too Fast, Too Furious.
Yeah, so they're just, there's so many lies coming out. That book's been debunked 30 different ways from Sunday, and he's still going on. Actually, Mika threw him off the set, from what I heard,
saw that.
For some of the lies that he was telling. And but overall, I think we're going to see, you can't trump the Trump. Is that we've seen it with the Trump University, right? He wrote a $5 million check to get rid of it. You've seen it with his casinos that, he says that went out of business, so he didn't end up paying, painters and, some of these guys, some of these contractors and everything like that. And yet, what do people see that as? They see it as a person, right? They see him as a real business owner. People relate well to him because maybe they've had an affair in their life. Maybe they've gone bankrupt in their life. Maybe they've done some of these things on a much smaller scale than obviously a Donald Trump. But what ends up happening is he becomes the biggest reality TV star, also has billions of dollars worth of property around the world, and then runs for president and says whatever's on his mind. No political correctness at all. And so people relate to that. And so when you can't out-Trump the Trump, you shouldn't try, because he's representing the common man in a sphere far bigger than you and I could ever, figure out.
I got a 3-year-old co-host joining us for the show now. Yeah. So I actually read an article about, did you hear about this Jimmy Kimmel wanting to have Stormy Daniels on, the porn star? There was a really good article. I've got it here on my computer. I'll try to see if I can screen share this.
That's the first time I've heard Stormy Daniel in an article. Were you reading it for the articles?
No, I was on my Craigslist app actually, but I also have it in an article. That's the thing with being a porn star. And we talked about being attractive earlier. Like they have the average life of a NFL running back, right? So she's actually done a pretty good job capitalizing on her newfound fame as one of Trump's old supposed mistresses. But what I was going to say is this gal who wrote this article, which screen am I on here? Jake. Hold on, Simon, say something clever. I'm going to get my kid out of my room. Don't let me
down. Okay. So we're talking about Stormy Daniels. I think one of the things about Stormy is that I think is when you talk about your 5 minutes of fame, right, you have to add some mystery into it. So if you just go in right away and you talk about, okay, look, I didn't have an affair. I signed an affidavit that says I didn't have an affair. I have gone through with my lawyers and my managers saying I didn't have an affair. And then I have to go on Kimmel and provide some sort of intrigue that keeps me relevant. And you say stuff like, well, does that look like my signature? Does that look like this? Because otherwise, if you just come straight out and admit all of these things that didn't happen, it takes away the intrigue. You became the back page news, and then your 5 minutes of fame goes away. And if you're going to capitalize the most on it, this is the way to do that, is to keep the intrigue going, knowing that there's, you know, supposedly falsities in this.
All right, so
you guys have a great track record, though.
You guys can rate in the chat how he did, because I wasn't there to hear it. So hopefully, Simon, that was brilliant. I've got this. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this article in the Federalist I liked because it's the title of it is by booking a porn maker, Jimmy Kimmel degrades America. So I'll be honest, this is a little moral highbrow, but the thing I really liked is she makes the case about everything that's wrong with Jimmy Kimmel and the virtuous signaling that goes on in Hollywood. So Jimmy basically invited this chick onto the show, and she was supposed to tell all about what was going to happen. And she kind of punked him over and said she didn't actually do anything, but she still might have gotten paid. So she talks about how he jerked his chain a little bit. What I really liked that she did in the article, though, is at the end, she's the one who coined the term, you can't out-Trump the Trump. And basically about how because Trump knows all their tricks and because he's been one of them for so long, his skill, his peak effectiveness is at making sure that no one lands a punch that he can't counter. And I totally agree, but that's the one thing that always made me nervous about him, right? You've got this guy who's got all these moral failings, who's not really that good of a role model in a lot of ways, who left Omarosa on his show for an entire season and then hired her in the White House. I'm sorry, I watched The Apprentice. I knew what a stupid decision that was. She was a disaster. And she accused someone of saying the N-word on the show, which never happened. And I have no patience for that. But she talks about how none of the stuff Kimmel's doing is doing anything but degrading him. It's making him look like a joke. It's killing late night comedy. They were going to bring her on and have 3 different sized carrots and ask her which carrot she preferred. And, but she goes on the show and she uses it basically as a promotion event, a PR for her career, which of course the porn life career is probably not going as well as it used to. And she made a couple interesting points. She said, one, do you remember the brief moment Senator Marco Rubio thought he could beat Trump with the, quote, size of his hands jokes? With fleeting funny, Rubio trafficked in the very thing he found unpresidential about Trump, making his attempt fail. You can't out-Trump the Trump if you want to land a punch. This is something I think is profound. If you're going to traffic in Trump's expertise, you're going to get whipped. And you saw that at the State of the Union. You saw it in the debates. And you're seeing it now with liberals in general, is that there are things that Trump is very, very good at. It's not being married to one woman. It's not keeping his pants zipped up. It's not some of the things I'd like to see. But when it comes to Jimmy Kimmel, this is a game he can't win because Trump is going to crush him. And all it does is hurt Kimmel. Here's what she says to wrap this up. She says, instead of taking the moral high ground, what Kimmel really wants is a spectacle, which is why it's a disaster. She says, I dare Jimmy Kimmel to ask Daniels to apologize to Melania for any pain she had in part causing. The only way for Kimmel to prove he's doing this for good reasons is to take a stand against infidelity during the show and to have her admit that what she did was wrong. And we should hold everyone, including Donald Trump, to a higher standard. And then she says, you know, Adam Carolla is not the one who ditched his wife as soon as he got famous. That was Jimmy Kimmel. So I predict he will not. In my opinion, she hits him square between the eyes and she basically calls out the hypocrisy that's Hollywood. If you want to call Donald Trump all these names because of what a horrible person is, then you don't just say, look at what he's doing, look what he's doing. You do what they're trying to do in Hollywood. This political partisanship masked as virtue signaling doesn't work because they're not looking at the large scale effects and saying, okay, so who else was involved? Who else was hurt by this? How do we make it right? They stop short of that and say, how do we just make fun of Donald Trump for doing something that all the rest of us have no problem with outside of the fact that he's our president? And I totally agree with her. I'm not explaining it that well, but I just thought the article was great when she did say Adam Carolla didn't dump his wife when he got famous. And why not bring her on and say, hey, so why did you cheat on a married man? Did you not know that was wrong? Did you not know that Melania was a kid's mother? And no matter what you thought of her, that you might be ruining her life? Like that'll never happen on Jimmy Kimmel's show because that doesn't help him, doesn't help Hollywood, and it doesn't hurt Donald Trump. That's it. I'm done.
Yep. You know, we could give 1,000 examples of how you can't Trump because, you know, for a whole 6 weeks before the shutdown, it was the Republican shutdown. It was Republican shutdown, Republican shutdown. And after one press conference, it became the Schumer shutdown.
When was the last time Republicans didn't take the blame for a government shutdown? When has that ever happened?
It's always the people that are not in power that are usually blamed. But yeah, they definitely tried to do that anyway, though. And it would have worked with the mainstream media. But man, that Schumer shutdown and proving that, you know, like that they were putting in the the chip funding and all that other stuff. Like you really can't out Trump the Trump. I mean, he talked about a few things that I'm not a big fan of, right? $1.5 trillion in spending for infrastructure and, paid family leave. I think that should be up to the business. I don't think that's something that, every American should have to pay for another person to have a baby.
Agreed.
But he says those things and he looks over and he gives them one of these, like, are you going to stand for the things you want? Nope. Okay. Well, I guess that's not important then to you, right? Because once they sit down for something that they want, he can say, at the State of the Union, I told them I wanted to do this, and they weren't excited about it at all. So I figured they don't want that anymore. So we've done other priorities. How embarrassing is that?
Savage.
That is so Trump. The other part too is, I mean, this thing with Jay-Z. Apparently, Trump is one of his 99 problems. We found out in the last week. So you have a guy here who has shot his cousin, I believe, right? He's stabbed someone.
I think it was his brother when he was 12.
Yeah, I think he shot his brother. He's stabbed somebody. He was a drug dealer, and he cheated on what could, arguably be one of the most beautiful, most talented women in the entire world, with multiple people, from what I understand. And here he is as another virtue signaler, right? Because out of all of those things, the man is now worth $900 million. He's almost a billionaire, and probably the next year or two, he'll be in the $1 billion club. You look at America, what other country can you shoot somebody as a young kid, stab somebody as a young kid, deal drugs as a young kid, cheat on one of the most famous women in the world, and be considered a success, that the president invites you to his parties, for 8 straight years and hangs out with you, and you become almost a billionaire.
Well, maybe if Narcos, Colombia, go with Colombia. They eventually moved to Panama, but I don't think you can do it there. Venezuela, Russia, I'm kind of out. That's all I got. America.
It's the only place. And so instead of Jay-Z coming and saying, hey, look what I was able to do with all of the things that happened in my life that, we to look at Trump and we say, oh, what a horrible guy, he cheated on his wife. That's a horrible thing. Nobody, that shouldn't be done, but it happens, right? Many times over, millions of people have done that, and they either asked for forgiveness or they've moved on, they've separated, they've done what they needed to do. But you have somebody that's calling out Trump for all of these things, but it is the epitome of what second, third, fourth, fifth chances are in America, is that you can now become an icon that the president for 8 years relies on as a campaign buddy and a donor and a party friend. And that's a pretty amazing thing, living in a penthouse in New York, $50 million penthouse or whatever he's got, making, Beyonce's pulling in $50 million a year. He's pulling in another 50 to 70 million a year, which obviously the Democrats don't like, because they don't like people to make over a few $1 million a year unless they're liberal. But yeah, this guy's a success story by many, many different roads, and yet he's fighting with the president about being divisive. It doesn't make sense to us in normal land, because that's not a road to success for a lot of people. Only in America can that happen, and he should have American exceptionalism as a part of his talking point, not that he's the moral standard for what America needs to do.
So it's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. And, I hate the fact that he started out, he admitted in an interview that part of the way he learned about how to do business was by slinging crack in the hood, basically, stringing out his fellow Black Lives Matter aficionados. And I hate that. And he used that experience to become a savvy business person. But what's more interesting to me than that is the fact that, all right, no, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to get myself in trouble. Yeah, more power to him. It's a really good point. We're a forgiving country. We're a charitable country. We're a country where anything can happen, where second chances happen when you're basically at any stage in your life, and it can come and go just like that. So all the rhetoric about, you know, rich getting richer and poor getting poorer. You and I are familiar with the stats that typically people turn and burn out of several phases throughout their life, and that the richest of the rich actually phases in and out. I don't have the stats in front of me, but it's pretty fascinating. What I think is even more so is I told you there was I found an Instagram post of Malcolm X saying the Democrats are playing you for political chump, and if you vote for them, not only are you a chump, you're a traitor to the race. What I'm going to look out for is, after this has happened, after Black unemployment has dropped so low, after there's been so much outreach to the Black community and talk from Trump, is to see people like Jay-Z and to see the Congressional Black Caucus. What's the reaction going to be from people who have the cognitive dissonance of seeing their lives improve and seeing their paychecks go up and seeing job opportunities while being told by quote unquote their people that Trump hates them and he's racist and he wants them to X, Y, and Z, suffer, be jobless, and die in the streets, or whatever the line du jour is. What do you anticipate will be the result of this?
I think that after the State of the Union, for the polls that I saw, you had the Democrats lose all of their gains. Independents loved it at 75% or above. Some had 80, some had 77. But for the most part, the highest amount of independents and Republicans had it at, you know, in the 90s. And even Democrats had the speech at almost at the 50 mark. So when you go back and you go to these midterms, what are you touting as your accomplishments? That you shut down the government on behalf of non-American citizens? That you are putting your politics above your principles of saying that I have the opportunity to sign a bill that says we're going to, you know, stop a mass majority of illegal immigration through all of these means by giving, and in return, we're going to give these 1.8 million people that virtually have lived in America all their lives and are probably, you know, I'm not going to quote anything from the president that says, you know, how bad they are, but a lot of them are good people. A lot of them live in our communities. A lot of them go to our churches and our synagogues, and we respect them, and we're going to give this opportunity to more of them. How are they going to say, no, we don't want to come to the table because Trump's a meanie, Trump's a bad guy, Trump's a racist, he wants 3 times more you know, people to get citizenship than Obama did. Can you believe this guy, how much he hates, you know, other races? It's hard to, how do you argue the fact that he's saying, I'm going to give you this if you give me this? And they have to go stare these constituents in the face. So my first thing is that I think you're going to see a lot of these guys lose their races, and they thought they had this tide of anti-Trump, you know, sentiment to write in. And if your whole thing is anti-Trump, and then Trump says stuff that you want, well, guess what? Now you're anti the things your constituents wanted and put you in power for.
Yeah, you have to decide if you hate America or if you hate America or Trump more, because unfortunately for Democrats, what's good for America is not good for them because of the decisions they've made. And speaking of losing seats, we got to wrap up here in a little bit, but I want to ask you about, did you hear Trey Gowdy's not running again?
One of my favorites. Yeah. You know, from what I understand, he treated it like you have a duty as an American that can go in and make change. And he felt like he put in his civic duty, and he's going back into private law. And I respect that, right? We don't want lifetime people in the House and the Senate. We need to have term limits. That's a definite must. I know you're a repeal of the 17th Amendment.
All the way, baby. Get it gone. I hate the 17th Amendment. But this is why, I mean, in the old days, they lived a lot less time, but they went to Washington. They saw it as a public duty. They didn't particularly love it. They didn't have all the goodies they had now. And the turnover in Congress at the turn of the century was 50%. 50%. Half of them would come and go. And that was even, you know, it was just before FDR when he was stacking the court, you know, what was it? The vote in time to save 9, all that nonsense. But there was a time when J.D. Hayworth was running or was in office when I started following politics over a decade ago. And they were arguing about term limits back then because they will ad nauseum until they get rid of the 17th Amendment. It'll never go away. And a caller called in and said, you know, the problem with term limits is the good ones will get voted. The good ones will have to leave. And I'm in my car, a young guy thinking, who's she talking about? And the guy asked him, well, who do you mean? She was like, you know, like J.D. Hayworth. I'm thinking, come on. You're going to not pass the law because you think J.D. Hayworth is a good congressperson or John McCain is? I look at Trey Gowdy and go, you know what? In some ways, I hate to lose him. He's a force for good, but he's doing it the way it was supposed to be done. and this is how I feel about pastors. It's how I feel about Congress people. It's how I feel about everyone. You have your professional life, the way you feed your family, the work you do with your hands, and then you have the things that you're passionate about. And as you get older and you mature and you look at what your priorities are, you say, you know what? I like the Pat Tillman. I have a sense of civic or moral duty. I need to contribute here. I need to give something back. Not to put on Instagram or on charity TV or reality TV, but to feel like I'm complete as a person, that what has been given to me, now I can return to the next person who needs it, that you can pay that forward, you can share that light that you have, and you can be an influence for positive good. And you and I talked today actually about, being children of divorce and how that affects your psyche and the choices that you make because of that being in your history. And I was terrified of marriage, but I was really excited about having kids. And as I've gotten older, all these problems, and this kind of goes back to the Jordan Peterson link that I did this morning, all these problems that we have in the world that the young activists are tricked into thinking that they can somehow solve, despite the fact they don't have the intellectual, moral, or character traits to do it. It's a fool's errand. Because what has to happen is it's a numbers game. We have to take enough young, smart, intellectually honest, moral people and just outnumber the opposition and flood the zone. And that's the way I look at the kids, is that we need good people to displace the bad ones. And we need that to be happening consistently enough that it takes decades, generations for the world to actually change because of the net effect that's happening at the most base minority level, which is the individual. Myself, my wife, my kids, my friends, people like you, Simon, going out there and making a difference every day and saying, look, this is what's important to us. This is what's going to make this world better. We're going to do it in the trenches, 1v1. It's not going to happen in Washington. It's not going to happen at the national level. It's not going to happen because of lobbyists and bills. It's going to be us going out there and saying, this is the standard we have for ourselves. This is the standard we have for our communities. And this is the standard we have for America. And it happens at the ground level, which is why I feel so strongly about kids. They're the force for good. And there's my anti-abortion rant is that no one knows, I think it's an old axiom from an Indian tribe or something, no one knows which womb the chief is in, right? No one knows the potential of a human child except for their creator. And no one really can judge until that life has been lived how much net good they can do in the world. And that's our responsibility. So long story long, I love the Trey Gowdy stepping down and setting an example of doing what we all should do if we get into this position of power, doing what George Washington did and say, look, I did what I could with what I had. Now it's time for someone else to do their part. And that should be that we shouldn't need term limits. We shouldn't need to ban abortion. We shouldn't need to be commanded by the government to do things that are moral and good. We should be taught to do them and be teaching each other to hold that standard by ourselves. I think that's how we solve the problems that we have. Sorry, rant over. I'm done.
That was a good rant.
Thanks.
I agree. We have a moral obligation to teach our kids how to treat other people, right? And so, this is where the collectivism I hate, because I want everybody to be treated like an individual. And if I don't like somebody based on the type of person they are, the negativity they bring into my life, my kid's life, my wife's life, whoever's life, is if I don't want that person around, I don't want to be labeled as somebody because of what they look like, what they practice, who they believe in. Those things don't matter to me. It matters is how do you affect myself, my family, my friends, my kids, everybody else, and is it positive or negative? And if it's positive, I want you in our lives. And I'm lucky enough to have kids that go to a school where they there's all kinds of the walks of life and people from other countries, and his best friends are a Muslim, a Hindu, and a couple of other people, which is fantastic. Christian people and non-Christian people.
What do you mean by other people? Sorry.
Well, white guys. He's got some white friends too. But
token white guys.
But but the funny part is and we get together as parents, and there's so much more else we have in common than what we actually disagree on. And we'll talk later in probably other segments about like me Venn diagramming America and how we see people, or you and I see people, and how much more interconnected we are with our beliefs and our values than you're going to see with us not being connected. But when you watch, the media, it'll show it so much farther apart. And I know that's a whole nother segment, but I can't trump the Trump, man.
Can't trump the Trump. Yep, he's doing some good. I was reluctant Trump. You were apparently semi never Trump, but the litmus test is the Constitution. Are we better as a people? Are we better as a nation, as a union of states? Speaking of State of the Union, because of the actions he's taken, and I think unquestionably in the first year,
ground we base it off of, right?
There you go, coming full circle. And I think unquestionably the answer is yes. So to you watching live or later, thank you so much. This is our second episode. Join us every Thursday, 8 o'clock Arizona time, which is 8 o'clock Mountain. And I'm also interviewing. Do you know Naomi Schaefer Riley is? I'm interviewing her next week.
Should be a good interview.
You know who? You familiar with her?
No.
So she wrote an article recently in USA Today about how it's not professors, but the culture on campus that's turning kids into socialists. She wrote a book called The New Trail of Tears, how the government's still basically effing the Indians over. That's not the actual title, but that's the working title. And then I don't have it. It's on the sofa. I was going to set up an interview for that because I read it. And then she just did a book called Please Be the Parent. And it's about screen time. And she has kids that are similar in age to mine. And it's about how we're the first generation, unlike past generations where grandma and great grandma and mom knew the answers to every parental problem. There's never been a parental generation that had to deal with screen time. Like, it's a totally new game now with screen time. We don't know the long-term effects. We don't know how to not turn our kids into zombies. We don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. She wrote a book and talking about how to keep that under control and not turn your kids into zombies. So we're going to talk about that next week. But do new interviews up here every single week on OhHaleYeah. Simon and I will be here for the Enlightenment Hour on Thursdays. Why should you care? And we're going to start bringing guests on too. I'm really excited about doing that. So join us every Thursday. Simon, thank you for joining. And to all of you watching, school's out. See you next week.
Thank you.